Hola, hola, buenas noches. Hey, everybody. Um, Thank you for joining me tonight. As is sometimes an issue when I have a guest who is on the other side of the world, we're having some complications tonight. Um, but we're going to hold on for a second to see if she is going to be able to join us. So thank y'all for coming. For the folks that don't know, I used to live in China. I've been gone for about 2 years. And something that y'all may not realize is that uh, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, basically most of the things on the internet that you can access very freely, you can't really do that in China. So, as somebody who lived there for a year and a half and experienced all kind of issues, it could be that our guest tonight is having internet issues because when I lived in China, um, okay, for the folks that are my age, do y'all remember what it was like when we had dial up? A lot of times, that's what my internet in China was like. I really feel like everybody in my building was sharing the same bandwidth. So if I tried to get on the internet, when people were like still awake, uh, it wasn't happening. So I'd either have to wake up super early or wait until they were done. So she could be having internet issues. She could also be having issues accessing the stream because I would bet money that I'm using StreamYard. I'd bet money that it is blocked in China. So, so we're gonna give her a few minutes to see if she can join us. It is also, I think, like 7 a.m. in the morning over there. Uh, so who knows? Who knows? Um, if you are new and you are just joining us for the first time, hello, thank you for joining. My name is Adelia Borishade, and I am the founder of the Picky Girls Travel Solo Facebook group. It is a group for Black women who want to travel solo, who currently travel solo, all of that good stuff. I am also the creator of the Financial Confidence Academy, where I help Black women develop the financial confidence they need to master their money so they can live the life of their dreams. I'm very thankful you have stumbled across this channel. If you're into travel talk, expat life talk, money talk, you are in the right place. Make sure you subscribe. We are trying to hit 10,000 subscribers. We're making progress. We're getting there. So yeah, that's what we're here for. My guest tonight, I believe she has been in China since the fall of 2019, because I know I was already living there before she moved there. And so she has lived in China pre-COVID and now in COVID, and has decided to leave and is heading to Colombia. Um, so yeah, how are y'all doing tonight? Excuse me. Perdón. How are y'all doing tonight? Are we okay? It's Wednesday, and for a lot of you, y'all had the day off on Monday. So, how are you handling your Wednesday? Because I can remember coming back from a long weekend, that would always be a struggle. Yes, I'm thinking it's going to be really interesting. That's why I'm really hopeful she is going to be able to join us tonight. Let me double check to see if she has messaged me. Adulting, seriously adulting, tired, longer work week than usual. It's Wednesday. um, yeah, long weekends are always great when you're on the weekend part, but when you got to come back to work afterwards, that's always the struggle. That's always the struggle. Um, Let me see. Um, if our guest cannot join us tonight, is there a topic that y'all want to chat about? I mean, I've got some ideas of things I want to talk to y'all about, but I'm curious what's on y'all's mind. Okay. Hmm. All right. So, is that Her Royal Highness Sophia the First? I laugh because my granddaughter watches Sophia the First. I'm work from home, so still, so those days are pretty sweet. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Let's see. I just got a text. Give me a second, y'all. Okay. All right. Uh, Trying to jam 2 days worth of work into one. Yeah, that's how it is. Haha. It's interesting that you asked this question. Is rainy season crazy? I'm wondering if rainy season has started because it rained. Is it crazy? Normally, no. However, with climate change doing what it's doing, um, the weather here has not been normal. I'm sure y'all have heard me complain about how hot it was in February, March, and April, months when it should not have been hot. May is typically the hottest month of the year here. Um, and then normally sometime in May, early June, rainy season starts. And typically it is not crazy. Rainy season just means like around 5 o'clock it will rain for an hour maybe, and then that's it. That is normally what rainy season is. With climate change, I don't know what it's going to look like today around 4, 5 o'clock. It did rain where I was, so I was like, okay, that's normal. The temperatures have definitely cooled down in the last week, for which I am very grateful. Although I'm hoping that that is because, like we're getting on track with our weather and not a side effect of the hurricane that they had experienced a little further south. So no, typically rainy season is not crazy here. Rainy season is just like really the only thing that normally changes for rainy season is you need to like plan your day in such a place that wherever you are around 5, 6 o'clock is some place that you want to be so you can sit out the rain. You don't want to be like getting off the metro and having to walk home right when the rain is supposed to start. And I tend not to sleep with the window open because my windows don't have screens and I get like one or two mosquitoes. Um, so yeah, that's really the only thing that changes for rainy season here in this part of the country. It's not that chaotic. Okay. So, um, I'm curious. Do y'all want to hear about when I lived in China? I don't typically talk about it, but I might be far enough removed now that I can discuss it without flashbacks. Uh, yeah, hurricane season. Mexico has both Pacific hurricane season and Atlantic, but here in Mexico City, if anything, we might get a little rain, but that's very rare. So hurricane season in this part of the country isn't that big of a deal. Let me check my messages one more time to see if she was able to message me. This is kind of one of those things about living abroad that maybe we don't talk about enough. So like I take Spanish classes. My teacher lives in Copan, Honduras, which is very close to the border with Guatemala. And even I lived in the capital and we would often lose electricity, And so in the middle of my Spanish class yesterday, we're talking and then all of a sudden she was gone. And like I tried like calling her back, and no, their electricity went out. I think they were getting some rain from the hurricane. And so like, she was very apologetic, but that's just one of those things. Like the electricity could go out, or what was the other thing I was going to share? We don't really have unstable electricity here, but you know, but like in China, this is something I remember greatly because I started my podcast when I was still living in China, and I would schedule guests and like cross my fingers and hope, one, that the internet connectivity would be there like it was supposed to be, and two, that my VPN would do its job and I would be able to access, the websites that I needed. And so like, I guess having the flexibility and like not getting bent out of shape when shit doesn't go like it's supposed to, like that's a really important trait I think you need to have if you are going to live abroad. Okay, so let me tell y'all about my time in China. I had visited China. Actually, it was my very first like solo trip for pleasure. I had traveled for work by myself, but this was the first time like I had gone on a trip that was like a vacation trip by myself. I spent a week in Beijing, and I can remember um, that at the end of that week saying to someone that that was the most foreign place I had ever been. Like it was, I might have even used the word alien. So I share this with y'all so that you know that I was never a big fan of China. Like I saw the Great Wall and I did the things, and I was like, if I can come back and maybe hit Shanghai and Hong Kong, cool. But if not, I don't ever need to come back to this country again. So turns out that I did end up coming back to China about 2 years later. The high school that I taught at in Texas had a sister school in Foshan in the southern part of China. I believe it's like very close to Hong Kong. Like we flew into Hong Kong and took the ferry uh, over to Foshan. And so I was chosen to be one of the teachers that took our kids over there and, chaperone the whole thing. Hong Kong, I was like, I can get with this. And even my time in Foshan, it was okay, but it did not make me think like, oh my gosh, I have got to get back to China because there's so much I'm missing. Like I was like, I'm cool if I will come back. I still haven't been to Shanghai, but if I don't get to see it, not a big deal. But how did I end up being there, living there? I got to blame Kuwait. After I left Mexico City in 2018, I had a job in Kuwait that sucked. It sucked so much, I left. And a job in China kind of fell into my lap. I actually, when the day, probably the day I started my job in Kuwait, I started my job search for a new job. That tells you how bad it was. And during that time, when I was searching for another job, I actively avoided applying for anything in China. Like, I would set the filters for the countries. I was like, I do not want to work in China. Everybody was like, hey, but we're making all this money in China. I was not interested. Um, and a job sort of fell into my lap. And I said to myself, because I'm forever practical, can't be worse than Kuwait. So it was originally a 4-month contract. I was like, I can go do this. And I got there and it was not worse than Kuwait. And they caught me on a really good day to ask me if I wanted to extend my contract. And I said yes. So that's how I ended up being there for a year and a half. This was a country that I had no interest in visiting ever again or even living. And if you're wondering, like, why is that? It just, I don't know, it didn't do it for me. And my first 2 visits to China, I did not have any of the issues that you typically hear from people of color, particularly Black people. There wasn't touching, there wasn't people taking my photos. Actually, they were a lot more excited to see white women with blonde hair. I felt like, for the most part, I was invisible. So I really wasn't expecting any different than that when I moved there. But it was different when I moved there. It really was. So that's kind of how I ended up being there. I'm just looking to see what y'all's questions were. And so we need to put up an advisory warning to talk about my time in China. You know what, Cece, you're right. And I didn't realize this, that I really did kind of like have some PTSD about my time there. When I came back to Mexico in July of 2020, and I was so happy to be here. Um, I I would see something and then I would talk about, like, oh, that's so great here because in China, and then like I would get all these like physical symptoms of like, this is causing me distress. And it's I can't put my finger on one thing that was like so horrible about it. There were lots of horrible, there were lots of not great things about my time in China. Um, from, like getting there, flying Chinese airlines, they be on some BS. My flight was canceled. You can fly direct from Houston to Beijing. The school did not book me on that flight. Instead, I had to fly from Houston to someplace in California, and then from there to Shanghai, and then from Shanghai to Hefei, the city I was in. And so I get to California and I'm trying to find the gate for my flight. And the people at, I think it was Air China, were like, oh no, we canceled that flight. What? So I mean, like, it started off bad. The person I was replacing apparently had some kind of episode that they did not feel he was safe enough to like continue to teach there. So he, I don't know if he left or he was sent home. And I get to my apartment and, okay, this is one of my first issues with China. It is like cleanliness, hygiene. That was a big part of my issue. I don't like squat toilets. I think I used one when I was chaperoning the school trip for the kids because we were at a high school, and of course, at a Chinese high school, the public bathrooms there are not going to, there were no foreign teachers there, so there would be no Western toilets. So I think I used a squat toilet once, and that was enough for me. Um, my apartment, I I remember asking somebody who worked there about the guy who I replaced because I got his apartment. And I was like, did he have a dog? I'm thinking this man had like a husky or something because of the amount of hair that was on the floor. And they were like, no, he didn't have any kind of pet. So I'm like, then of course I was like, I can't touch anything in here until I get cleaning products. So like it started off not great. Um, and then of course we got into the way um, people in the city I was in treated me as a foreigner. I always joke and say that Hefei is a small town of about 7 or 8 million people. I know when we think of 7 or 8 million people, we think big city. This was not that. This was not a very international city. In China, you hear people talk about like tier one cities like Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen. Tier two, I think Hefei might have been like a tier three city. Out of the 7 or 8 million people in the city, there were probably about 5,000 foreigners. And of that 5,000, how many were Black? Not very many. So it was not, like I've moved there. This is not my favorite country. I don't speak Mandarin. I knew 3 words of Mandarin when I got there. Um, yeah. So things did not start all that great. So it's funny because I had a coworker that loved China and suggested I visit. I was real blunt and said, "It's because you're a white male." Yes, if I would agree with that. That most of the people I worked with were white, either Canadian or South African. There was a Nigerian guy, and he eventually, over the time I was there, his wife and his 2 kids came, and they got it so much worse than me. Like, it just got old. The being stared at, the people taking your pictures, and people said this to me all the time. Oh, that's because, they don't really see people who look like you, or they don't know that staring is rude. And so one of the things I started to do, like the little old ladies are breaking their necks staring at me, I would stare back. And when they would make eye contact with me, all of a sudden they're like this. So what that tells me is, it's not nice to stare at people. You just mad because I caught you. But my coworker and his wife and his kids, they would get mobbed. It was very difficult for them to go out in public. And that's a very hard way to live your life. And so like the Canadians and the white South Africans and white Canadians I worked with, they had some knowledge of it because no matter what kind of foreigner you are going to feel on display in China. But I tell you what, they got a real taste of it after the pandemic started. I don't know if y'all are aware of this, but okay, so China went into lockdown in the city I lived in, maybe late January 2020, definitely February. By March, end of March, beginning of April, the narrative in China had changed. And it was foreigners who were felt to be bringing in COVID, and it was all foreigners' fault. So then you started to see like the xenophobia ratchet up. I've told this story before about this old man who we walked up to a crosswalk, and I stood next to this woman, and this old man is yelling at her in Chinese. And no, I don't speak Mandarin, but I could read his body language, and it was like, don't stand next to them, don't stand next to her. And he got so upset that he went ahead and just crossed the street. The light hadn't even changed. There would be stuff like that. Like you would order a Didi, which is kind of like Uber. And if they would message to ask if you were a foreigner, and then if you said yes, they would cancel your DD. Or if they showed up and you were a foreigner, they'd be like, no, no foreigners. So my coworkers got a little bit of that, a taste of that after the pandemic started. And they didn't like it. And I was like, yeah, y'all, this I've been treated the whole time I was here. So yeah, I'm seeing what y'all are talking about over here. I was able to avoid squat toilets. I was very strategic about it. My apartment had a Western toilet. Where I worked, there was one bathroom stall that had a Western toilet. That was the only one I used. I only went to the bathroom at home. If I was going somewhere in public, it had to be a place I was confident had a Western toilet. I was not about squat toilet life, and squat toilets aren't always in their own stall. Sometimes it's just a line of holes on the floor. And like, I guess you squat as a team, as a group. I don't know, but I wasn't going to find out. So I was very strategic about that. And if I did not know, I wouldn't go. Spitting. Oh, the spitting. I knew that that was a thing, but what ended up happening was I knew spitting was a thing, but I thought they at least kind of gave some care not to spit on you when they spit. I was wrong about that. So you would just be walking down the street minding your business, and all of a sudden you hear somebody and I'm just to the point now that I can hear that noise and not have a physical reaction to it. But it took one time where somebody almost spit on me, and then I realized like, oh, you're assuming they're going to aim and not spit on you, and that's a faulty assumption. So yes, there was lots of spitting. There was lots of the, clear out your nose with one nostril, and that didn't always happen outside. Like, I was in the checkout line at a grocery store, and I heard that noise, and I looked behind me. Grandma had spit on the floor and then tried to like use her foot to spread it out. I don't know what she was thinking, but I was like, I see you. I see what you're doing. So yeah, like that kind of stuff was a problem for me. And I was there, of course, from the beginning of the pandemic. And this was one of my concerns was, y'all, I don't know what it was like on the outside in February, early March of 2020. But for me, one of my big concerns was I didn't want to get it, because remember, this is kind of like, I'm not even sure how they were testing at this. I don't even know if they had a test at that point, but I didn't want to get it. Because I was like, what's going to happen to me if I have it? Are they going to remove me from my apartment? Are they going to send me to a COVID camp? Where's that going to be? Y'all know I'm a picky eater. Eating in China was hard enough for me already. you gonna restrict me at a COVID camp? Like, I didn't want to be disappeared. So like that added to the stress of being there. But even pre-pandemic, I was ready to go. Um, it because I actually found that I was changing my behavior pre-pandemic. I found that the staring and the laughing, the pointing was weighing on me so much that I found that I was trying to go outside less and less. I didn't want to be outside because, we lived in these high-rise towers, and I had to walk my dog, so I have to go out there. And I'm like, I've been living here for almost a year. Y'all see me every day. Why are we still staring? Like, why is this still a thing? I remember I went downstairs and I'm sitting on a bench, and they would do this often. Like, if the people I worked with, we would, like, let's say, go to the park to hang out, take the dogs out, whatever. The Chinese would just kind of pull up a chair and stare, because it was like they were watching animals at the zoo. Um, so it so I might just be trying to sit there and like enjoy the outside, and I have an audience of people. And it's like, I don't want to live like this. So actually, when we had the lockdown, I enjoyed that because nobody was on the streets. So when I would go to the grocery store across the street, there would be very few people. I was a little bummed when we had to go back to work because I was like, oh, I got to interact with the Chinese now. Um, so yeah, it, it was not a great experience for me. I got to travel to a few places that I wouldn't have otherwise. I did attempt when I first got there to learn the language. It's really difficult, and the Chinese are unhelpful. So if you don't pronounce the words the exact way that you're supposed to, they just kind of stand there. There's no like, oh, I think she might be trying to say this and let me ask. None of that. So I was like, and y'all, this is after I had lived in Honduras. This is after I had lived in Mexico, where, my Spanish was not great. But if people saw me trying, they were like, okay, we're going to work with you and try and figure out what words you're trying to say. The Chinese were not having that. So I gave up trying to learn the language because I wasn't going to be there long anyway. And, I ate at places with picture menus. Or I would take a picture of somebody's food and I just hold up the phone and be like, one of these. um, so yeah, the end of my original 4-month contract, I came and I spent the summer in Mexico, and really I didn't feel that bad about going back to China. But the minute my plane landed in China, like everything I hated about the country came flooding back. And I was like, this was August 2020. And I was like, I've got 10 months. How am I going to do this? So I was already counting down. I could tell people how many days I had left. And then the pandemic started. And I actually got stuck because I could not fly out with my dog. And with the way things were, it was like, if I flew out and I left her there was no way that I knew I'd be able to get her back. And here we are 2 years later, and I would not have, based off of what has happened, I would not have been able to go back and get her. So yeah, I got stranded in China for a month. I was kind of homeless because my apartment was tied to my job. And I had turned in my resignation in December of 2019. So when I couldn't leave, at first my employer was like, oh, don't worry, you could just stay in the apartment, over the summer, blah, blah, blah. And then they were like, hey, we've hired your replacement and he's coming, so we need your apartment. So I was low-key homeless for about a month before I could get out of China and get back to Mexico. So yeah, that's kind of my China story. And I haven't even told y'all the worst of the worst, because I'm not trying to like badmouth China. It just was not a good experience for me. I know there are people who live in like Beijing, Shenzhen, Shanghai, who are like, oh my gosh, I lived a great life. And maybe if you are in a city like a tier one city, or one that has a lot of interaction with the outside world, your experience is different. But my experience was not was not great. Yes. Who is it? It gets worse. Yes, it does. There are some things. Yeah. Ah, it was just not a good place. And then, like, there's the whole level of living in a country with an authoritarian government, and an authoritarian government that makes no apologies for it. Like, there's not, there are other countries where their political system is less than democratic, but they at least try and pretend it is. And I was acutely aware of my situation. I'm a Black American. If shit went down, if somebody accused me of something, okay, so here's an example. When you get a work visa in China, it is very specific about, it's very much tied to a specific company doing a specific job. And so, some foreigners would be like, oh, but I can also tutor on the side. There was a campaign put out by the government to get people, locals, to narc on people who were working under the table. They were going to be paid, I think it was like the equivalent of $10,000 to turn people in. Okay, so, like, there's that kind of stuff happening. There is, because I know how the world works, there's always the potential that, and especially as a Black person, we know how it goes when somebody says, oh, this crime happened and a Black person did it. Okay, we know how that works. Um, I just thought about, like, okay, if they arrest me here, what is the likelihood the US government is going to give a damn and do any kind of work to get me out? So that I carried with me, and knew that I could be arbitrarily arrested or arbitrarily detained. And, like, I lived in Kuwait. Kuwait is not a democracy. And in China, I just was like, I don't want to be disappeared. So I carried that with me. Of course, you're being surveilled everywhere. Um, there would be periodically, from time to time, foreigners who would decide to test the system, because y'all know there are CCTV cameras everywhere in China. Um, and so there would be some foreigner who would be like, I'm gonna see if they really watching. And there were a couple of stories while I was there where somebody like stole something, and the cops were at their door within hours because of the CCTV footage. They could track you down. So like, so living under that, with the stress of, being so severely othered, on top of some of the hygiene things that I was witnessing, it just was not an enjoyable place. Even my best friend was like, your standard of living, your quality of life was better in Mexico City. And I was like, yeah, you're right. This is not, this ain't it. So yeah, where I just saw, yes. Okay, so F Doctor mentions Elise Lightyear. I follow her on IG. She is living her best life. She also lives in Beijing. Um, I think part of the issue was where I was living, although I did visit Shanghai a couple of times, and there was a little less othering, but it was still China. And I didn't think it was that great. Um, like one of the things I brought back with me from the US from my summer break, I brought back like bleach and Comet Ajax, because when I would go to the store to buy cleaning products, I couldn't find anything that had bleach in it. I could not find a bottle of bleach. I found like water that might have had a little bleach in it. But like when people would hire folks to clean their apartments, I'd ask, I said, so what's she cleaning your house with? And they were like, water. There was a time I took Mia, my dog, downstairs to walk her. And a lady gets into the elevator with me, and she's got this plastic bag, and there's a fish, like a still alive fish that she just caught that morning for breakfast. We live in the middle of a city. Where'd she get that fish? From the decorative pond in the development. Like it was stuff like that all the time happening. Um, and so it it was wild. It was wild. No, I have not heard from my guest. Oh, okay, there she is. There she is. Yes. Okay. All right. So that's my little my little fun time in China, which was which was not great. Which was not great at all. So let's see if she's gonna pop in here, y'all. Um, and when I had to fly back to China during the pandemic, my flight from Europe had been canceled, and they were like, "Oh, we can get you in next month or something." And I was like, dude, I gotta go to work in 2 weeks. Um, they put me on an Aeroflot flight. That is an airline, a Russian airline that is famous for the number of like crashes they have. And we had to transit through Russia. US citizens, we can't go. We have to have a visa. I didn't have a visa. So I was very nervous. Like, technically, to transit, you shouldn't need a visa. But I was very concerned, like, is this going to go the way it's supposed to go? Or am I going to get stranded in Russia and be SOL? Um, so, so yeah, my little Chinese adventure. Uh, a year and a half. I am very, very grateful to be back in Mexico, my second home. Um, and who knows? Maybe one day China will open back up to the outside world, and y'all can go visit and see all the stuff that there is to see. But yeah, yeah, she should be joining us momentarily. And this is one of the reasons I don't typically share my experience, because I don't want to turn people off to China, because y'all, there are tons and tons of people who go and have a great time and have a great experience. But it never was my cup of tea. When I visited as a tourist, when I visited for work, it just was never the place for me. Um, but there are lots of folks who, are over there. The cost of living is really low, and the pay is pretty good. So with those two things combined, it is a destination. It's definitely like if you're trying to like save up and stack some money, China is a good place to do that, which I took advantage of that. Uh, I took advantage of that. And we didn't even talk about the struggle it was for me to eat. Y'all know I don't eat fruits, I don't eat vegetables. And this is a country with a history of like famine, and people don't question the food you put on a plate. So here I show up being like, well, what is it? And okay, well, I don't want this, I don't want that. They were looking at me like, what is this foreign lady talking about? Eventually, the ladies in the cafeteria, like they would know me like this is part of the reason I gained weight because my food choices were limited. And so like the fried chicken, French fries, that line in the cafeteria, those ladies knew me. And I would walk by and they'd hold up a bag of fries and a thing of chicken wings and be like, for you? Yeah. Um, oh my gosh. The drama to find peanut butter in China. It was something else, y'all. Um, Another thing about China is a lot of the like rules and regulations we have about food. In China, they may see those more as like guidelines versus like, hey, if I put this ingredient in this product, I could be sued because people get sick. It's more like, hey, this what we got, this what we putting in there. So trying to find peanut butter that was just peanuts, it was a struggle. Like I did at least find a supply of that. But me trying to eat there, I also don't like white rice. So no fruits, no vegetables, no white rice. I didn't want to eat anything I could not readily identify. So that made things really stressful. There was, given the sanitary concerns I had, you know, you had to have a lot of faith if you were going to eat out at a restaurant because who knows what kind of nonsense could be happening in the kitchen. So I ate a lot of McDonald's. There was one across from my apartment, and my reasoning, because I don't eat McDonald's in my normal life, but my reasoning was, McDonald's, because of how they do things, their ingredients and all that have to come from specific suppliers. So I felt a little safer about knowing that what I got at McDonald's was actually what I thought it was. For the most part, the kitchen area was open, so I could see them when they prepared my food. But eating McDonald's every day, that's that's not a healthy way to be. So eating was a struggle. Even getting dog food from Mia. She wasn't with me for the first 4 months, but I brought her back when I came to the US, picked up Mia, we flew to Mexico, spent the summer in Mexico, and then we flew back to China. And so I knew I did not want to feed her Chinese dog food because y'all remember a few years ago, I don't even remember how long ago that was, that there were like, because the food ingredients are more like guidelines than rules, they had substituted something in the dog food and it ended up killing all these people's pets. So I found like some Canadian dog food that was being imported, and that's what she had to eat. It was not a life of ease. And y'all know I'm all about that now. My time in China was not about that. Okay, so I don't know why she hasn't popped in here. I saw somebody ask, my guest, the person who's supposed to be my guest today lives in China and is moving to Colombia. I am not at this moment moving to Colombia. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. I'm just seeing what else, y'all. I'm reading y'all's chat. Yes, their McDonald's did have some different offerings, but I kept things simple. And that's the other thing. Like, I learned this the first time I went abroad in 2001. In the US, where I might order a hamburger and I say plain, like no vegetables, no this, no that. That's a very hard thing to do in other places, because in other places, you just get it the way it's made. So I would, to add another level to my food drama, when I was ordering, I'd have to order something that I could easily see what the ingredients were on it so that I could say, no, I don't want that. I started with 3 words of Mandarin. I know how to say hello, thank you, and I don't want that, because I thought that was an important thing for me to be able to know. And then I learned how to say no vegetables, and to go, how to, like, I want to order this food to go. And that is the extent of my Mandarin knowledge. Okay. All right. So, um, Mia did really well. How did the dog do with traveling? Mia travels very well. She's a very chill, relaxed kind of dog. Although flying to China was the longest she had ever flown. We flew from Atlanta to Seoul, and let's talk about that. In case somebody happens to be watching this and they're like, "Oh, but I am moving to China and I'm taking my dog with me." The thing is, at least in China, having a dog as a pet is a very new thing. Like having a dog on your farm outside with the cat to like kill rodents, that's as old as people. But this idea that like, oh, my dog in my house has special privileges, that's a very new concept. None of the Chinese airlines allow pets in the cabin. Doesn't matter how small your animal is, they do not allow them in the cabin. Okay. Mia, 1, is old, and 2, she has a very delicate nature. Her being underneath a plane was non negotiable. So, normally when you fly from the US to China, you're going to fly over on Delta or United. But once you get to like Beijing or Shanghai, you have to, the second part of your flight is going to be code shared um, with a Chinese airline. They're not going to allow your pet in cabin. So what I needed was a foreign airline that flew directly to my city, because like the way I originally came, where I flew from Houston into, I think, Shanghai, or maybe it was Shenzhen, and from Shenzhen to the city I lived in, Hefei. If I had done that with the dog from Shenzhen to Hefei, I would have needed to hire a private driver, a moving company, something like that, because she couldn't go on the train system. She couldn't go on buses. So to alleviate that, I had to find an airline, a foreign airline, not a Chinese airline, that flew directly to my city. Korean Air happened to be that airline. They were a little bit more expensive, but they did what we needed to do. So we flew from Atlanta to Seoul and from Seoul to Hefei. She handled it really well. This is when I found out that pet relief areas in the airport is an American thing, that foreign airports don't have that. But she was okay. So flying on a plane, that is not a big deal to her at all. She just gets in the bag and she's like, okay, where are we going? So luckily, that wasn't a problem. Now, the amount of paperwork I needed to get her into the country, that was an issue, and it was a very expensive issue. Um, and technically, I guess I can say this now that I'm safely out of China and have no desire to return. Technically, I sort of brought her in illegally, because prior to when I had moved there, if you were coming to China with a pet, there were specific ports of entry you had to use, and there was mandatory quarantine. That's the other thing we wasn't going to do. Mia thinks she's a person, so she needs to be with people. She was not going to survive hanging out in doggy jail for 4 weeks. Okay. And so when we arrived, they had just done away with the whole quarantine thing. But when we arrived at the airport in Hefei, that has never had a pet import station. There was no place I could find to take my stack of paperwork. So I just put all of my luggage on the cart. I sat her bag on a thing. I couldn't find anybody to turn the paperwork into. I couldn't find anybody to inspect the dog. So you know how when you get to customs and you have to scan your luggage through the machine. I let them scan all the luggage. The bag that had the dog, I was like, no, not that one. They put my luggage back on the cart and we rolled out of that airport. So technically, there's no documentation that the Chinese government has that she was ever there, because I sort of just brought her in illegally. Now, if somebody would have stopped and been like, we got to look in that bag or whatever, you know. But I was also prepared for, we may get there and they may reject this paperwork. What am I going to do? Am I going to fly back to the US? Y'all can see it was a whole lot of things. So what do you eat? I get this question a lot. I eat meat, I eat pasta, I eat some legumes, pastries. I as long as they don't have fruit in them, I'm not mad at pastries. Let's see. I see in the comments, y'all are talking about the eating of dogs. Mia is a miniature schnauzer. Oh my gosh. And she's down there asleep. Otherwise, I drag her up here. Y'all, she's a little thin pin. She weighs like 10 pounds. We would get in the elevator. I lived on the 22nd floor. I don't know. I lived high up. We get on the elevator to go downstairs, and people would be in the elevator like, oh, this dog is in here. And I got so fed up one day, I yelled at them in English. I was like, my dog don't want you. Because I was so tired of these people acting like she was like some kind of vicious attack animal. And apparently one of the people I yelled at did speak English. And we ended up in an elevator together again. And so she turned to tell me to apologize and just to let me know that she had this fear of dogs, blah, blah, blah. So yeah. So yes, there are several places in the world where people eat dogs. And China is one of those. Although, like, I don't see, because I was trying not to tell this story, and I think I still won't. But let's just say I went to China because I knew eating dog was a thing in parts of Korea. I made no assumptions in China. I was like, whatevs. But let's just say that the idea that some people eat dog was confirmed for me 100%. And we'll just leave it there. I won't get into the details of that story, but just know, yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing. Okay, I don't know what happened to our guests, why she didn't come. So I'm sorry. I'll have to go back and change the title of this. Hopefully we can reschedule and y'all can get what you originally came for, because you did not come to hear my shenanigans in China. Let's see. All in divine order. It worked out the way it was supposed to. I guess so. I guess so. I am one of those people that I really, I try and find the lesson in everything that happens to me, even the things that like be messed up. And so, like my ability to cope with things and to kind of like handle less than ideal situations. Like I worked those muscles while I was in China. I worked those muscles while I was in China. So yeah, I guess that's a positive. I can tell you, my appreciation for Mexico City, I didn't think it could be any grander than it already was, and it is. I was so happy to get back here where like life made sense, like, and there are a lot of peculiarities about life in Mexico, but like I could roll with whatever was thrown at me here. Um, you know, no, this is the last comment I'm gonna make about eating dog. Here's the thing, y'all. Meat is meat. Uh, you know, this notion that we have about like there's certain animals it's okay to eat and certain animals it's not okay to eat. Like, why is that? So my issue never was like if somebody was gonna eat dog, hell, I may have eaten dog. That's fine. Like, but like I don't want to eat my dog. Uh, and I don't want nobody to eat my dog. But meat is meat, food is food. I ain't judging nobody on that. So yeah. I'm seeing what else is in the comments before we wrap this up. But yeah, I am very appreciative of of being back here and being back on this side of the world where things make sense. So yeah, so my time in China was not great. China is Would I visit China again if somebody else was footing the bill? Probably. Like, there might be like, I was supposed to go up in Harbin, up at the very, very northern part, like next to Russia. There's an ice festival they have there at the beginning of January. I was supposed to go to the Harbin Ice Festival, and that didn't happen. Something like that, or like maybe go to Tibet. But if I gotta spend my own money, nah, fam. I'm not going back to China. I'd have to like win a trip or something. And that's just like I told y'all, it wasn't a place that I loved before. And after living there, I really am like, that's great. Y'all can keep that. So, all right. So I will go back and I will change the title of this video so that it more appropriately reflects the content. Thank y'all for hanging out with me on this Wednesday night. If you haven't subscribed, please do that. I am trying to get to 10,000. I like that round number. And so I'm trying to think, is there anything else I need to tell y'all about? I don't think so. So y'all enjoy your Wednesday night, and I'll see you back here live. Okay, next week's live. I have a guest. We should not have these technical issues. Y'all gonna want to be here for next week's live. That's all I'm gonna say. Okay, that's all I'm gonna say. All right. Good night, y'all.